Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for taking some time for us, and a big mahalo for doing this.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's so cool to be able to be on here. This is my second home, and I don't do a whole lot over here, so it's really great.
It's cool. We'll dig a little into your Hawaii connections in just a moment. But firstly, with your occupation and the nature of what's been going on with the concert business since, I guess, March of 2020, you're a good person to ask a few questions to in terms of the status of upcoming shows. And I went on to the website that Danny's got for his business there, and obviously, as a concert promoter, you can imagine he's already got things lined up and ready to go. So, thinking of your enterprise there, have you already started doing shows yet, or are the shows I saw at your website like going to be the first one since the crisis?
Those will be the first ones. I think the first one I have is Gordon Lightfoot in Chicago, and then Frankie Valli in Wisconsin for a couple days. We get busier in August, and then September is off the charts. What's been happening ever since last March of 2020, all we've been doing every month, every 2 months, especially at the beginning of the crisis, was we moved shows that were in March, April to May, June, July, and then April came around and it didn't look like, everybody was thinking things were going to get better a lot faster.
Right.
I mean, nobody could conceive of this going on for this long back then. Looking back, I can't conceive that this actually happened, but it did.
Right.
But we were playing hopscotch on the calendar, every month, every other month, thinking that, things would restore and go back to normal. So fortunately, most everybody kept their tickets, and we kept the shows, most of them, if not close to all of them, alive. But unfortunately, timing wise, after a year of this going on, in March, they started moving June shows, or April started moving June shows. And boy, would I love to have my June shows right now,
Sure.
But nobody could tell what was going to happen. I mean, our crystal balls were very cloudy as time went on here. And so, yeah, by August, September, we're back at full strength.
And then these shows that are going to be coming up in terms of things like social distancing, for example, and lower capacities, is there any of that? Have any of these bands ended up having to take like a lower guarantee that equates to a lower capacity to accommodate the social distancing?
I don't know. I can't speak to everywhere, but in my personal case, I didn't do shows while this was going on because it's impossible to ask big name artists to play for a fraction of what they normally would. Their take on it was, let's just wait until we can do it the right way.
Right.
And according to what we're seeing right now, I don't want to mandate masks. I don't want to mandate social distancing. I want people to go to shows the way they're used to going to shows. Now, if people feel more comfortable wearing masks, like I probably will myself when I'm in crowds of people I don't know, I think it's going to take me a little while to wean myself away from that, although I'm pretty comfortable with it already. I think it's going to be up to the person itself, himself, herself, themselves, to do whatever it is they feel comfortable with. But I don't think we can mandate, an all mask concert or social distancing concert, or I would have done that already. And I chose not to because I don't think that's the way people want to look down from the stage and see an audience 6 feet apart. It's just so distracting, to do it that way. The whole thing about performance is incredible to begin with. And then to ask people to change how they do it and what they're looking at while they're performing it, it just didn't seem to work.
Okay, so the answer would be all the shows are going to be at full capacity, no social distancing, and then the masks are basically optional.
Exactly.
Okay, that's what we sort of
Yep.
figured. As you see, we have we talked to a fair amount of artists on the show, so we've been hearing some of what else you said about how a lot of folks just they kept the dates. The dates just kept getting moved further and further into the future, so that they'd have something on the schedule. And so your very first one, you said Gordon Lightfoot, right? Was what? And the cities that you book in, you're generally you're talking to us from your second home of Hawaii, but the cities you do a lot of it in Arizona. But then name some of the other places, the other states and cities that you're putting shows on.
Well, let's see. Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, California, Colorado, Nebraska,
Okay.
Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Texas, Atlanta. I'm leaving out some Nashville. Um,
A lot of
you
places.
know, a lot of places, and it's basically. I mean, I'm not the full time promoter in any of those markets besides Phoenix, where we live. Our main home is in Phoenix, and the second one's here in Hana. Um, but all those places we're going to, we've got to ask all the authorities in every different one of those things what's going on. And by and large, you know, at least for now, and I hope forever, uh, it seems as though we're pretty much back to normal. I hesitate saying that just because it's been so long since I've said that,
Right.
uh, and I'm thrilled. I mean, I feel like the biggest part of this problem is past us when it comes to doing what we do, which is putting on concerts and gathering people together. And I couldn't be happier about that.
Well, that's cool. Well, that's great to get the update from somebody who's on your end of the business, which certainly complements the information that we get from the artists, and obviously adds to it in a very useful way by perspective. And to turn into Danny's got this book, All Excess Occupation Concert Promoter, and it goes into his life, obviously, as you can imagine, booking shows and all different sizes of shows, from giant stadium dates to smaller venues, and how he got into the business. And it's clearly we would be, if we were to, and I just went through the book from top to bottom, so if we were to really cover this thing, we'd have you on the air for weeks to get through it, because there's just so many great stories. But I've tried to pick some highlights out from along the way. But before we, as I guess a jump off point to get into that, Danny's a sometime Maui resident and friend of Shep Gordon and Alice Cooper, who both have been on the show. And so let's explain, I guess, as a way of getting into the book. And again, not starting right at the beginning, but sort of towards the beginning of the book. Explain how far you go back with these two Maui characters whose friendship, it seems, and you can explain if I have it right, but it seems their friendship is what brought you to be a sometime resident of the Valley Isle as well. And that's Shep Gordon and Alice Cooper.
Yeah, absolutely. They are especially, well, Shep, because Shep's the one that lives here, but it was because of an Alice show that I met Shep. And it was just because of Shep that Alice was out there to begin with. In 72 and 73, which are the 2 years before I started promoting, is when I really cut my teeth on a lot of the what you would call the beginning parts of a career, which at the time I had no idea it was going to be a career, right?
Mm.
You just don't know, especially when it comes to the music business. But when you're 18, 19 years old, you're really just figuring things out. And in my case, the combinations of the lock just kind of opened up as time went on, as opposed to staying locked and keeping me on the other side. I was hired on by chance to do security at the first Alice show of his $1 Billion Babies tour, which was in Tucson, Arizona, at the very beginning of May 1973. So that makes us 48 years old. Our friendship and our relationship started May 3rd. And I was a security guard at that show.
Right.
And then that led to me getting hired for another show up in San Francisco with Led Zeppelin, not to do anything important, but it ended up becoming important for me anyway. and for the book purposes. But the whole thing with Shep and Alice started at Billion Dollar Babies, and my first real introduction to Shep was Shep running me over as I'm on my way to get an injury I sustained while doing security. And Shep and Bill Graham were in a fist fight, and they knocked me over while I was on my way to the medic tent because Bill had apparently thrown Alice's dad out of backstage for not wearing his pass, and Shep took exception to it, and they belted each other, and this went on for minutes. And when I say, minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but imagine two crazy Jews out of their minds trying to kill each other.
Right. No, I can imagine a couple minutes is a while.
Yeah, and I mean, but they were throwing haymakers. They were kicking, scratching, elbows, biting, you name it, whatever they could do. And they were a bloody mess. It scared the hell out of me. But it was quite rambunctious. I mean, if I was ever going to be in a fight, that's the kind of fight I want to be in. But at the very end of it, Shep's walking away, and he issued a few more expletives to Bill. And as he's walking by me, he blinks one eye and smiles at me and goes, "Got him." and I love telling that story, and Shep loves it too. It was incredible. But if anybody who knows Shep, and I know there's a lot of people out here that do, they don't know him to be that kind of guy.
Right.
But the fact is, as gentle and as compassionate and as charming and wonderful as he is, you don't mess with Shep.
That's a funny story in the book.
Yeah, I love that one. And I mean, and it was one of the things at that time in 1973, in my little 18 years of time on Earth, it made me go, I want to be in this. I want to be with him. I want to do this with them. I mean, it's like I was addicted, almost immediately, even before that. But if there was any one moment in time that cemented it for me, it was that day.
And it was because of those cats, do I have it right? That's what got you to get a place in Hawaii.
Well, yeah, I've been coming over here for almost as many years since then, but really solidly since the late 80s. I've been coming here and staying with Shep, very gracious, my friend who lets us us travelers and whenever it's possible for him. I mean, he's so welcoming and open to that. He's taught me a lot in that regard. But we ended up buying a place together, and with some other friends, Paul Mancini and a couple of other guys, Mike Atherton from Hana Farms. Oh, I'm not Hana Farms, but the by King Cam. Mike's place is what is it? The Mill House. Yeah, we bought this over here about 15 years ago. So we come here 4 to 5 times per year. And almost every one of those trips we're able to go and see Shep on the way in and the way out, which is, among the highlights of every trip.
And then from reading in the book, and maybe I had it wrong, it sounded like you had a place on the Big Island too.
Yeah, in the 90s, we had a place over right above the airport there.
In Kona
in
side?
That subdivision in Kona. And I had that for a few years before I unceremoniously lost it in a divorce.
There you go.
I love Kona too. It's a marvelous place, but Hana is really the home place. I mean, this is it. I think probably the most Hawaiian place there is that I've ever been to.
And the book has some fun pics from experiences too on Maui, and one is hanging with Clint Eastwood among others. Was that pic where there's another picture? It has Glenn Campbell and Alice. That wasn't here, was it?
No, that was in Phoenix.
All right, that's what I figured.
Glenn lived over there for several years, and he was Alice's regular, like, weekly golfing pal. And then I got in on some games with them too. But see, I still work for a living. Those guys are on vacation 24/7.
Yeah. I hear
They
you.
get to play, they get to play all the time. Glenn, great. I shot one of my very best rounds of golf, and Glenn scored it, not Alice. Alice is a very, what's the word, generous scorer, where Glenn was a lot better. I shot a 77 with him, and I was riding with him, and he scored it. And Alice had me at 70.
Nice. And
I love Alice.
when was and the picture with Clint Eastwood, that looks like a few years back from the way from everybody in that shot, the age of that.
Yeah, that was in the early 2000s at one of Shep's famous dinners at his house. And Shep has a great way of seating people, and he knew that this is the first time that I met Clint, and he knew that I would like to sit with him and talk. And within 10 or 15 minutes, I canceled our trip over to Kauai that was supposed to go the next day. I went to my wife Leslie and said, honey, Clint's here for a week and he wants to play golf every day. We can't go. So we stayed at Chef's for the next week, and the three of us played golf every day.
Nice.
And then Don Nelson joined, and Paul Mancini, and some other folks. But really incredible times.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Paul. You gotta, when you're done talking to me, say, hey, I was just talking to this guy Dave Lawrence at this radio station in Honolulu. Do you know him? Let's see what he says.
I will do that. And before I came on with you, Dave, I sent Paul and Shep and everybody a note.
Paul's this big supporter of Hawaii Public Radio, too. So,
oh, excellent.
Well, that's great. You got all these cool Hawaii connections, and you mentioned him, and I guess it's an important way to circle back, because literally when people think of the word concert promoter, certainly in Hawaii, we had Tom Moffat, so people here would have Tom as like their centerpiece. But if you were from the mainland, perhaps, and you grew up with the rock and roll world around you, you would know that there was one guy, and you refer to him this way in the book too. There was just one guy who kind of was like the guy, and you witnessed that bizarre incident with him and Shep. But there's so many other great ways that the legendary, the late great Bill Graham comes up throughout your book. Great photos of you with big stadium crowds behind you. But I guess take us back to that early experience you had. I think it was the first time, it was even before, if I have this right, it was even before you saw the fist fight incident in Arizona. You were trying to break into the concert business, and you were in the San Francisco Bay Area in Berkeley, as I recall. It was a Yes Edgar Winter show. Johnny was going to be showing up, and I think that was your first ever encounter with Bill?
Yes, exactly. That was July of 72. I should tell you before I forget, tomorrow, or I don't know when this is going to air, but tomorrow is June 2nd. So we should say, for purposes of this recording, this is my 47th year tomorrow from my first show. Mm-hmm. And just, within the couple years prior to that, the Shep and Bill thing happened. But prior to Alice and Shep, I moved to Berkeley directly following my graduation from high school. And I didn't have hardly any money, but I really, really believed I was moving there. I brought all my record albums, which was a lot. That was basically my furniture with my record albums. And I brought my stereo. I brought my black light and my posters.
Priority.
And I had a beautiful set of blacklight posters, carefully curated from the late 60s through 1972. So I had the very best stuff. And all that stuff got stolen out of the car the first night we got there.
Wow. Welcome to San Francisco.
Let me tell you about depression. Right. Because you see, actually what happened was, I lost A to B from the records because they were in the car. The stuff in the trunk survived, but everything in the car, which was all those posters, 100 of the greatest posters of the time. I'll bet worth $100,000 right now because some of them were just amazing. And all my 8-tracks, which I was going to sell on the corner instead of panhandling because I knew I was going to need money, right? How weird, I mean,
Unbelievable.
and that's how I was thinking. That was my career at the moment. Um, the place that I moved into is called Dwight Way, which is right in the center of Berkeley, right by Telegraph Avenue. And we got a second floor walk up, me and a couple that I went there with. And the guy downstairs was an usher at the Berkeley Community Theater. So we moved in, and the next day was the Allman Brothers. And he said, when I met this guy, Jerry, he goes, "Come to the show tonight. I'll sneak you in." So I went in, and I met this guy called Twigs, who looked like a normal biker, long hair, braided, has the chain on his belt, the whole bit. And he befriended me, and by the end of the night, he was giving me advice on what to do because I wanted in this business. He told me to show up at the next show and just start unloading equipment and act like I belonged. So the next day, Edgar Winter and Yes were playing, and the Yes truck shows up, and there I was. And I just kind of, smoothed my way onto the truck like I knew what I was doing, and I didn't. And I just started helping unload gear. And for effect, I spoke with an English accent to the San Francisco guys, and I spoke normal to the English guys, so everybody would think I was with the other guy, which explained my presence. And that worked all day long. I stayed out of the way. I shut my mouth until dinner time. And Bill Graham comes walking in. Everybody's, "Hey, Bill, hey, Bill, hey, Bill." And I'm sitting there eating my third meal of the day. And I tell you, this is my first day with 3 meals for over a week, right? And and as I'm eating, I'm in mid-bite. He picks me up by the car and goes, "Does anybody know who this kid is?" And everybody said, "Oh, he's with Yes." "No, he's not. He's with you, isn't he?" And I got busted, and he admired the fact that I got through a whole day without getting caught, and he looked at everybody around the room like he was going to kill him for not knowing better, because that's obviously a security risk even in 1972.
Right.
And he kept me by his side the rest of the day, rest of the night, and he goes, "Come with me. We're going to go get Johnny Winter. He's going to be getting dropped off behind the theater, and you can carry the guitar." And he brought his Flying V with him, and he went to play with Edgar. He'd just gotten out of rehab that day. He got released from rehab to go play with Edgar.
Amazing.
And it all happened, and it was magical. And I mean, it's like it happened yesterday, as far as I'm concerned, but that's 48 years ago.
That's a great story. It's a great first introduction to Bill Graham, too.
And again, it's like, this is the kind of stuff like you go, you mean all I got to do is figure out, in order to stay in this and make a living, I just got to tough it out for a while. Well, I didn't know it was going to take 4 more years.
Right.
But, it was basically the equivalent of how long somebody goes to college and gets a degree. And that's what I did.
And by reading the book, that's a great analogy, because that's sort of those initial years, all those rough experiences, they do add up. You end up Mahavishnu Orchestra. Our buddy John McLaughlin, who's been on many times with us, that was your first gig in '74, and then you end up in the mid '70s. There's another Hawaii connection that comes along, which is kind of a fun one, because it also illustrates like the evolution of the story, if you will, by jumping ahead a little ways, but of course, because we can't get to everything. But it's Chris Christopherson I'm talking about. He's been a guest also on the show, wonderful guy, and you did some fun work with him for the filming of A Star Is Born alongside Barbra Streisand, and that was a Bill Graham production too.
Yeah, so if you flash forward from the Allman Brothers and Edgar Winter and Johnny, I got some money and I started promoting my own shows in '74, and Mahavishnu and Herbie Hancock and Arlo and Brian Auger, and I did Dave Brubeck. But and then this guy calls me up and he goes, "Do you want to do a show with Mahavishnu and Jeff Beck together?" This was in '75.
Right.
May of '75. And I remember the line on the art for the show: "If you're going to see one concert, this is the one. I've used I've used that line 100 times and over the last 40 years because it's a great line. It really sums it up, and that was true about that one.
Totally.
And that's where I met Jeff. That's where I met Jeff Beck, and we're friends to this day because of that experience. But I had nothing else going on right then. That was in '75. But I got on that show, and the guy goes, "Hey," he goes, "what do you do besides put on shows?" I go, "Nothing." He goes, "Do you need a job?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "Well, I own a waterbed store." It was a very famous waterbed store in Phoenix on Camelback Road. So I got hired to be a waterbed guy. And he goes, "You can use the phone. We've got a Watts line," which for people who don't know what a Watts line is unlimited long distance dialing, which we all have on our cell phones now.
Right.
And I sold waterbeds and made really good money. And I got to use the phone to do whatever I was doing with the live music stuff. But frankly, I was kind of at a lull there until one day at the end of '75, Bill calls me up. I don't know how he tracked me down to this waterbed store. And I answered the phone, Arizona Waterbeds. Bill Graham's on the phone. He goes, "What did you say?" And I said, Arizona Waterbeds. He goes, "What in the hell are you doing, Cisco?" So I explained to him that, since he didn't hire me, I was still in Arizona, but I said, "Don't worry, I'll crack this case. I'll make it happen." He goes, "All right." Well, he goes, "We got to do something about that." He goes, "But in the meantime, I got an important question for you. I got to do a stadium show there." And he explained the whole thing with the Stars Born, which for anybody who doesn't know, in the Stars Born movie that Chris and Barbara Streisand did, there's stadium scenes in the movie to show off John Norman Howard, which was Chris's character in the movie. And they wanted to stage a stadium concert so they could have real footage of John Norman Howard Speedway playing in front of a stadium crowd. So they called Bill Graham, who else, to put on a concert for him. So the show was Santana, Graham Central Station, Montrose, the LA Jets, and who's the headliner? And Bill calls me with the question, who's the headliner? ZZ Top, Johnny and Edgar Winter, which I loved, of course, for a lot of reasons, and Peter Frampton. So Peter Frampton had just dropped Frampton Comes Alive. It wasn't really out yet. It wasn't the big deal it became yet, but I heard that record and it smoked from the first time I heard it. And I was a big Humble Pie Frampton fan, and this was a big deal. Plus, it was recorded at Winterland, and one of Bill's lieutenants, Jerry Pompili, was the guy who introduced Peter Frampton as a member of the San Francisco music scene. And I said, "You got to have Peter Frampton. That's the ticket." So he goes, "Okay." He goes, "I'm going to need you for about 2 weeks when we come to town for this." I said, "Fine." So the show turned out to be that with Frampton headlining. But the great thing about the show was it was $3.50 to get in. And this is where the Arizona Cardinals played for years. And it's where the Arizona State Sun Devils play still to this day. And 60, 70,000 capacity Tempe venue, the only stadium at the time in Phoenix. Yeah. And it sold out in a minute. But the caveat to going to the show was not only that it was only $3.50, but the gates closed at 9 a.m. The gates opened at 6 a.m. because they wanted the audience in there because they would only have sunlight and the lighting for so many hours until it got dark, because it was March. So everybody had to be there by 9 o'clock. So it was amazing. I mean, people stayed up all night getting ready for this back in the day, as we used to do. And everybody showed up there at 9 a.m. higher than kites. and they had themselves one hell of a concert for $3.50. It was remarkable. So for those 2 weeks, I had a 75 or 74 Firebird at the time, and that was my limo for Chris and Bill Graham, who I was assigned to for the entire run of while they were there, and we had a blast. It was incredible. And I love the fact that I'm here now talking to you, knowing that Chris has a place down the street, and I'm going to see him soon.
Well, and then the other one that you didn't kind of mention, but Montrose. So Sammy Hagar was on that bill, who also you have that connection to out there.
You know what? I think we got to look that one up. I don't think he was there. I think he quit right before then.
Okay. So it could have been right on the borderline, you're saying, when
it was right on the borderline of that. You know, Sammy had a place here for years as well, which I've stayed at and visited with him, and he's another one of our Maui guys.
Right, yeah. Right before he jumped on his bad motor scooter and got out of the Montrose scene. That's a good point. Well,
I love that song, by the way.
It's a fun one.
Oh,
it's a fun one.
I mean, for one guy to have done a bad motor scooter and I Can't Drive 55 in one career,
not bad.
I mean, what a bad guy he is.
Not a bad couple of jams right there. And, well, that just is a great illustration of just, I mean, again, the book is all excess occupation concert promoter. There's just a gazillion stories in here and every kind of artist you could possibly imagine. So I could never do it justice. I'm really just cherry picking a handful. Not really cherry picking because there's still even a lot of cherries left on the, for you to discover when you get into the thing. But the other, the other couple of ones on there that really, I mean, again, they're all really impressive ones, but of different kinds. But some of them are the kind of experiences that people maybe expect a promoter might have in his storytelling kit, like James Brown, 1980. His road manager comes along with him. Now, here's a guy who we've been hearing a whole lot of recently in the news, the Reverend Al Sharpton. And who could believe Al Sharpton was James Brown's road manager in 1980?
Unreal.
It's like, and the whole story, and you got your parents there.
But it's only unreal now because then he was just another road manager.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, now, and the role he's taken on.
This is the great thing about our lives. We get to take on different personas and different occupations, different roles. And in this case, so what is that, 40 years ago? Al must be in his 70s now. He wasn't that old when I met him, obviously. But, I mean, he was older than me. But he was, look, I was always great. I loved to promote R&B acts. I mean, we don't really have a lot of what they call R&B anymore. I mean, it's called hip hop or rap. And there's some guys who really who pay tribute to the old school versions, like, Drake can do it. And a lot of other guys are so amazing at paying homage to those great songs, those great styles and everything. But, it got modern and everything. Back in the day, though, in 1980, I mean, this is 20 years after James first came into the public eye. And God, I wish I was about, 10 years older and had James in those days when he first came out, because he turned heads and made people crazy. But by 1980, James was going through one of those ebbs in a career that was so sensational, but he wore it out, and styles changed. Everything changed by 1980. And so I got James on the first time he played in Phoenix for, I think it was $4,000 for 2 shows.
Right, something like that.
Which was really sick. And he played at the nightclub that I did, and that's where I met Al. And we bonded immediately. He's such a good guy. He's a very personable man. The only time I ever, and then he came back one more time with James. He was still with him. And then he moved on, and I lost track of him, and I didn't know anything about what happened with Al until many years later. And he was in the news, as the activist that he is and became even more popular from. And here he is, like he's an analyst on TV now, and
right.
and he's a spokesman, and he's a damn good one as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I mean, if I needed someone sticking up for me, I'd call Al.
It's amazing that his role, right, has you hit the it's evolved through the years, and from the Tawana Brawley thing to the, I mean, just so many different incidents and ways, and like you said, and now he's playing a huge role in the current state of affairs, as one
Yeah.
might put it in the United States.
I did get to see him just one time between then and now. It was maybe about 15 or 20 years ago. He was doing something at one of the hotels I was at in New York. And I walked right up to him. And by the time I got to him, he was hugging and kissing me. Danny, where have you been? You know, because like I said, we really bonded. And there was a couple of his brothers that were looking after him. And they made a step towards me, and he had to give them the old leave him alone.
Right. Yeah. It's one of my old brothers. You don't know who that is, kind of thing. That's great.
Yeah, but oh no, this is one of the good ones.
That's a really that's one of the very interesting kinds of dimensions to it, is the different kinds of characters. Like there's another time that you had a Whitney Houston show you're doing, and Mike Tyson is on the stage at the show, kind of like before she takes the stage, I guess during like intermission or whatever, kind of like making a little bit of a scene, and then she asks you to throw him off of the stage yourself. She's like, "Don't get one of your security guards. I want you to go up there and do it so it doesn't become even worse."
I love that you read this so much and that you like it, because that was an incredible like moment in time where, you know, like in movies, like where you feel like it goes like into a 3D atmosphere, or like a I thought I was going to be retired for good that night. I mean, here she was going, and in theory, it sounded really like a smart thing to do. All right, little white boy, you go down on that stage and you get that mother off of there. Right. So I'm cleaning it up for you. Okay?
Oh yeah, in the book, she's got very colorful language. Whitney did.
Yes, and she was pissed. I mean, she was upset about it, and I don't blame her, because when I got down to the stage, and I should have already known this, and this is something about being a concert promoter. It's not just about, you know, making the money or drawing the people or doing the promotion. It's about the show that you're putting on itself, and you have to be in 20 different places at once when you do a show. And I should have seen that, and I think that kind of incited her as well, that I didn't know that he was doing that, because I'm there to look out for her, nobody else. And when she pointed out to me that this guy was causing a ruckus on stage, I couldn't get there fast enough. And exactly what she said was true. And Mike was on the stage, and people are throwing things at him from the upper deck, you know, 10 feet away, that were right behind the stage, to, you know, for him to sign stuff and take pictures and all this stuff. And it's like suddenly it's his stage and it's his arena. And she was right. So she goes, "Get his butt off the stage right now." So I did that, and I had to ask him really politely, as you can imagine, because this is when Mike was in his full prime. This is prior to prison, right? So he was still a very young, excitable guy, and but he was the sweetest pie, and he couldn't have been nicer about it. When I asked him, he understood, and I said, "But here was the big one." I go, "I have to lead you by the arm off the stage." Like you're getting arrested. And he goes, "Okay, I understand." And I did it. The minute his foot and my foot hit the floor, the lights went out, and there she was standing right over us. and she blew it out. I mean, I think it was the best show I ever saw her do, because she was so emotional about all that. And then after the show, she had me back to her room again. And I opened the door, and, you know, she goes, "My hero." And I go walking to her to get my hug, and I hear the door close, and I turn around, and he goes, "You better enjoy that, because now you're dead." And it was Tyson standing behind the door. And he was kidding, of course. He didn't kill me, obviously. But it was a great moment. Unbelievable. I mean, to be around the caliber of those people and be in the middle of it was what a bonus.
Yeah, I mean, there's some fun stories. There's a little bit for everybody in this thing. It covers a lot of different genres, and as a final one before I let you go, there is I mean, because it goes right up to the top level of bands that he's dealt with, and as proof of that, Paul and Linda McCartney, they come, and this is, I guess, 1990 tour, if I have it right, and they come
Yep.
through Arizona, and you end up getting, they wanted reefer or something, you ended up scoring them some herb before the show. Tell that story.
Uh, yeah, the prior to this tour and these dates happening, um, out of nowhere, Paul had a couple of dates booked on the West Coast. I think there was Seattle and L.A., San Francisco at the end of 1989.
Okay.
And as soon as I heard about that, I found out who the agent was, and it was a guy who I'm friendly with, Alex Cochin, and I don't know how he got Paul McCartney, but God bless him for doing it. And I called him up immediately, and I told him I had to do this. Now, if you wanted to book Paul McCartney today, I mean, it's in the millions,
Right.
right? For a stadium show. This was under $1 million. I won't quote his earnings because I don't like to talk about other people's money. But it was less than $1 million, and it was more than 500. So figure it out. Anyway, I told him I had to have a show with him, and everything worked out, and we got him in April of 1990. At the time, it was a hell of a risk because even though the money was less than it would be now, all the tickets were $30 for this stadium. So it was a $2 million gross potential situation with 60-something thousand people, and it sold out as fast as we could print the tickets. And what was most amazing about it was that he hadn't toured for 15 years since he got busted in Japan for reefer. And you know, I mean, Paul's a pothead. So at the time, though, they asked if I could direct them towards some fluffy buds, and I was only too happy to, you know, accommodate them. And when I brought it to him, a dream came true because Paul said to me, "Do you have anything that I need to sign?"
Right. You brought a whole mountain of stuff, right?
It just turned out I had a grocery cart outside of the door, and I brought the whole grocery cart in, and he took care of everything. and he insisted on buying, you know, the buds.
And
so,
then,
I mean, what a mensch.
right,
What a mensch.
what a mensch. And then you ended up getting to go to London. You did another special event, and there was like, I forget the person, but like somebody, was it him who like you brought, somebody wanted to meet him? Maybe it was back in the States, and he like took him by the arm and walked him around for 15 or 20 minutes and gave him really personal attention. Was that him who?
Well, actually, that was my wife's Aunt Faye.
Right.
Who came.
That's it.
She came in from Iowa.
There you go. Right.
And she was like in her late 70s, and that was her first airplane flight.
Right, exactly. There you go.
So she has just gotten to the arena with my wife, and they're in the middle of their rehearsal, and the rehearsal ended, and he comes over to talk to me, and he goes, "Oh, and who's this anyway?" And I said, "This is Aunt Faye." And he goes, and he puts his arm around her, and he took her for a walk. And she came back. She was a blubbering mess. I mean, he walked all around the floor of the arena with her. "What are you doing here? How's everything? Blah, blah, blah." He didn't care about anything else. And she had I mean, it was one of my most favorite accomplishments ever because she is such a dear woman, and she went crazy for that. Yeah, but that was, you know, I mean, just typical of him. He's really, I mean, that guy you see on David Letterman or Stephen Colbert or wherever he gets on talk shows, he is that guy. He really is.
Oh, those are great. There are a lot of good, endearing moments. That would perhaps be the one, and you told it really well too. There's some touching stuff in this thing, and again, a lot of rock and roll stuff too. And I've tried my best to showcase a variety of some of the characters. There's jazz legends are featured in here too. I mean, there's stuff with Al Di Meola, and obviously you mentioned Herbie Hancock. There's a variety of music, but at the same time, it's cool because you kind of zip it together. And I also, on a separate note, do appreciate you giving us some insight into the current state of affairs in the business, which you did, and giving us some insight, because throughout the last year we've been talking to a lot of artists, and we just have not been able to hear this kind of perspective, which Danny, and am I pronouncing it right? Danny Zelisko, how do you pronounce? Say your last name for me once.
You can say it any way you want. Just call me, but it's Danny Zelisko.
Zelisko. I'm sorry. All right, Zelisko. Forgive me, because
No,
when I look at
fine.
it,
You know, a lot of from the old world and the old country, a lot of people say Zelisko just like you did.
okay, Zelisko.
You're close to it. Yeah, it's really been great to have been doing all this for all these years. And the important thing to me was doing it while I was still active doing it, rather than it being memoirs and remembering when and all that stuff. Because I'm still into this and doing it, and I plan on doing it for a while longer. Because I've made so many incredible friendships and relationships with some of the greatest musical stars, comedy stars on the planet. And as long as they're around and they want to do shows with me, I'm going to stick around and do them. And I think it proves a great point to people that if, you know, like we talked about the college education times, where you use your time to set yourself up for the rest of your life. I didn't know that I was doing that at the time, because I was hoping to get to the next day and pay my rent,
right,
or eat, things like that, pay bills, not write bad checks, and hope to pay them the next week. I've been through everything that everybody else has gone through, but fortunately the tumblers clicked correctly. I met some really incredible people along the way, but I also did some stuff for myself along the way as well, not to hurt myself, patting myself on the back. It's all the fact that these people in the music business exist and have made this incredible music and created this culture that I was able to jump into and become a part of. And I encourage anybody who's thinking about doing anything like this, whether it's music or building cars, it doesn't matter. You just got to stay with it and not give up.
Words of advice from a cat who did really good with his career, Danny Zelisko, and his all excess occupation concert promoter, new book, sometime Maui resident, friend of Shep Gordon and Alice Cooper, longtime concert promoter based in Arizona, and he's written this book about his experiences. And if you're on the Valley Isle, who knows, you could run into him a little easier than certainly us here in Honolulu. But I certainly hope, Danny, that you feel appreciated and that you had a good and pleasant time going through just a fraction of this incredible book with us. I'm really grateful.
Dave, I've done a lot of interviews about this book over the last several months since it came out, and I think this is the best one I've done.
No, it's very kind of you.
I really appreciate your thoroughness and looking into it. I would love to do more with you if the opportunity exists, but I do want you to let people know that if they buy a book, it's at dzplive.com. I self-published it. It was one of the hardest labors of love I've ever pulled off my life, because I didn't know anything about putting out a book. And like when we put the book together, they were all telling me that I had to have like a few photo pages and that was it. And I argued for 2 years about putting the pictures in as part of every story so that people could see the images that were important to me when I was telling the story, which is the way it came out. But there was a delay of a couple of years because I argued with printers and publishers and everybody to the point where it's like, I'm going to do this my way, even if it costs me. And it did. And that's fine because it came out the way that I wanted it. It's like I could have done half as many pages and still done a good book, but 350 pages, this is something that doesn't really take that long to go through. But I was able to share over 600 pictures in the way that I did it instead of 20 or 30, which would have never sufficed once you look at this. So I'm really happy with the way that it turned out. And if after hearing this, if anybody wants one, I'm happy to sign it and write whatever you want. But it's fun to have this done.
Oh, I bet.
Then we get to write more chapters.
I can imagine it is a labor of love, and really cool that it has a little something for everybody, whether it's Roger Waters and Floyd, or Billy Joel, or Bruce Springsteen, or any number of the cats that we talked about, or Dave Grohl, or whomever, and Rob Halford, Priest, Zeppelin, you name it. It's all in there, and obviously our Maui contingent, let's hopefully we can stay in touch, because I would definitely, I appreciate it, and you got some great. I would love to have your Rolodex to be able to book guests for the show, but that's what you've achieved by doing what you did, and you earned it. So
I'll tell you what I started doing, and I don't know if I'm going to continue this or not, but I started doing a podcast and interviewing myself people who
I saw that.
The book.
Al Di Meola, I just was watching the other day.
Yeah, I just did one with Shep, which we haven't put out yet. I did Roger Waters and Dave Mason, another island resident.
Yep.
And it's such a, I don't use the word bountiful that much, but it's such a bountiful world we live in, with really incredibly talented people and artists that we all get to listen to and know about, much less play with. And I hit the jackpot when it came to, getting involved in music. And it's a very rewarding thing, as you know, because there you are at one of the coolest radio stations on the island. So.
Oh, well, thank you, my brother. I'm high-fiving you, triple high-five on that, my brother.
Thank you, brother.
And I'm giving you a big hug, and I'm thanking you again. I really do appreciate it. And if you talk to Shep, tell him I said hi. But certainly Paul should get a chuckle, because Paul, we had a few mutual friends, and Paul's done a lot for the station. So
I meant what I said before. If you guys get a slow news day or anything like that, and you want any more in the can, I'm happy to talk to you anytime, just about any of the music business or any of the stuff. It doesn't necessarily have to be to pimp out the book or anything.
No, well, that's why I appreciate what you said about because that's helpful with the concert stuff, which I'll definitely will be a big part of it, because you've got that expert position. And I'm wishing you a lot of luck on all the shows too, by the way. I see you got Dead and Company, all kinds of stuff coming up. So please be safe with all that you're doing, and I hope that your travels and all your affairs are kind, and that they all work out in a positive way for you, my brother. I really mean it.
I believe you, and I really appreciate that. It's a pleasure. I look forward to meeting you sometime.
And we'll stay in touch for sure.
You did an amazing job, man. I'll tell you what, if anything comes up where I need a great host or somebody like that, I'd love to call you, because you seem to, you're very up on what I did, and you don't know how much that means, because I've had a number of interviews where people have barely glanced at it, and they expect me to fill up their 10 or 20 or minutes or an hour without saying much. And I'm really glad that you enjoyed it.
No, man, I loved it. And I just didn't want to milk you forever. The whole Stevie Nicks connection to that venue, which I didn't realize, and the Perry Farrell and the Janes and the instruments. I read the whole thing, and I was very, very, it's hard when it's like talking to, Steve Cropper or something like that. You got to kind of be selective. Like, what are we going to get into? We'll be here the next millennium or whatever. So no, I'm grateful that you said that, and just stay healthy, my brother. That's all I can say.
I will, and you do the same. Let's keep in touch.
God bless you, Danny.
Same to you, brother. Thank you.